Hello, and welcome to my review of Metro Exodus. Developed by 4A Games and published by Deep Silver, Metro Exodus is the third game in the Metro series, following on from the events of Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light. The games are closely based on the novels by Russian author Dmitry Glukhovsky. I feel that I should mention that 4A Games has worked tirelessly to craft this game in the wake of being uprooted from their Ukrainian studio after recent geopolitical events. Having switched publishers after the collapse of THQ just prior to the release of Last Light in 2013, the developer has managed to establish a base of operations on the island of Malta, from which they finished Exodus, which was released on the 15th of February 2019. This review will assess the game on the following general criteria: narrative, gameplay, presentation, audio, and technical. Like its predecessors, Exodus is an atmospheric and immersive post-apocalyptic first-person shooter with survival horror and stealth elements. While there are areas of this game that are more open to exploration this time around, the core gameplay experience remains tightly curated, and it is all the better for it. Fans of the previous two games will be pleased to hear that Exodus holds itself to the same high standards of immersion and world-building that sets the series apart from other games in the genre. Exodus's storytelling feels different from previous games, but retains many of the hallmarks of the series. This time, however, the game shies away from more supernatural elements in favour of a more personal and human-centred journey. As before, the narrative follows Artyom, now a fully fledged member of the Moscow Metro's Spartan Order, under the command of Colonel Miller. Miller's daughter Anna, now Artyom's wife, returns from Last Light, and there is some wonderful writing and animation throughout the game that helps to cement their relationship in the mind of the player. The story sees Artyom leave the tunnels of the Moscow Metro to explore the vast expanse of post-apocalyptic Russia aboard a train called the Aurora, along with Miller, Anna, and a handful of their fellow soldiers. Their aim is to find a part of the country that has not yet been irradiated or infested with mutants that they may one day be able to call home. The story is slow but well paced, and while it features some predictable beats, it's a compelling tale that keeps the player invested with poignant character moments and exciting set pieces. It covers the full emotional range, from hope, love and camaraderie, to disappointment, desperation and fear. The player is made to feel all of these through Artyom's eyes, since, aside from occasional loading screens, the game is locked to his perspective. It is this adherence to Artyom's viewpoint that allows the player to experience the world and soak in its atmosphere to such an extreme degree, and this is one of the series' strongest attributes. The narrative is broken up into sections based on both location and season, very similar to Naughty Dog's The Last of Us. The game takes the player from a bleak nuclear winter in Moscow's outskirts to a dried-out Caspian Sea, and eventually to the mountainous forest region seen in the game's E3 showcase. There are several stops in between, and a lot of more intimate moments where the player can simply sit back, hear what the crew of the Aurora have to say, and let the world of Metro wash over them. Like prior titles, the game has both a good and a bad ending, which depends on the player's actions during the game. This is tied to whether you choose to mercilessly kill wounded enemies, and whether you opt to help citizens in need or leave them to their fate. These choices are organically integrated into the gameplay and do affect the outcome of certain sections of the game, as well as the overall conclusion. The Aurora is the vehicle that literally drives the plot of Exodus, but it's also a vessel for the quieter moments of the game, in which the player can learn more about their fellow travellers. The tight, enclosed nature of the train lends itself well to creating an intimate and lived-in environment where character interactions are plentiful. The player is of course free to ignore many of these character-building moments, but they do so at the risk of missing out on some of the best dialogue in the game, and some of these conversations really tug at the heartstrings. Artyom has a notebook in his quarters that the player can read to gain an insight on the passengers and crew of the Aurora. Each significant character has a bio and reveals a lot about their outlook and history. Some characters are a little cliché, such as Miller himself, a die-hard military type with a profound sense of duty to those under his command. Others have backgrounds that make them far more interesting. For example, Sam was once a US Marine stationed at the US Embassy in Moscow, and managed to make it into the metro tunnels before the bombs fell, later finding work as Miller's personal bodyguard. I was delighted to discover this after hearing Steve Bloom's iconic voice performing what I initially thought was a very American-sounding Russian soldier. Artyom himself is once again a silent protagonist during gameplay, and I am glad the developers did not feel the need to give him a voice outside of the narration he provides during loading screens. These small snippets give the player enough of Artyom's thoughts to allow them to connect with him emotionally. The narrative and dialogue is cleverly written so that Artyom's silence doesn't feel jarring at any point. Much like Half-Life, there are even lines spoken by other characters that poke fun at Artyom's minimalist approach to conversation.
Artyom, rather than carrying on with this silent disapproval of yours, check the airwaves.
In addition to spending your downtime on the Aurora with your fellow Spartan Rangers, the game's missions are structured so that you spend a decent portion of time with each character by themselves. This helps to flesh out their personality, their past, and their prospects for the future. The character roster is kept small, and while there are some additions to the crew over the course of the game, the player is given ample opportunity to get to know their companions. Naturally, the most fleshed out character is Anna, and Artyom can choose to spend some time sitting with her in their quarters. Here you can listen to her reflecting on their current situation and the life they could have if they reached their goal. Exodus is definitely the most expansive, varied, and technically impressive of the three Metro games, but whether it's the most enjoyable depends on whether you prefer the freedom that the game's more open environments provide, or the dark, claustrophobia-inducing tunnels that form the basis of 2033 and Last Light. As a single-player narrative-driven experience in 2019, the game is, in more ways than one, a breath of fresh air, and I found myself utterly absorbed in the game's setting, the sense of place only magnified by the game's impressive visuals. As a fan of previous Metro games, I personally enjoyed Exodus the most. It feels far better paced than 2033, and far less formulaic than Last Light, while combining the best parts of both games, including the excellent approach to difficulty. In Exodus, both the Ranger and Ranger Hardcore modes are available from the start and don't require a DLC purchase as has been the case in the past. These modes are utterly punishing, stripping the player of any UI or HUD, while providing very little ammo and resources as well as increasing enemies' awareness. Conversely, both Reader and Easy difficulty present almost no challenge at all and give the player plentiful ammunition and crafting components on their journey. Normal, as is typical, presents a decent balance, where resources are scarce but sufficient, and enemies present a fair challenge in both stealth and combat. My recommendation is to play the game through on Normal, with both the crosshair and hit markers disabled in the options menu for the most rewarding experience. Like 2033 and Last Light, Exodus features a robust weapon customization system. However, to accommodate the more freeform levels in the game, customizing weapons has been dialed up to 11. Since Artyom no longer needs to purchase upgrades at metro stations, he now loots weapons and attachments from enemies and carries them with him in his backpack. These attachments, such as scopes, stocks and barrels, can then be swapped out in real time by opening the inventory, which sees Artyom remove his backpack and rummage through it. This real-time crafting is another excellent feature lifted from The Last of Us. Modifying weapons can drastically alter the way they perform, and while many attachments are objectively better than others, some offer a trade-off between damage and stability, allowing the player to choose the best attachment for the situation at hand. Artyom can use the workbench on the Aurora to switch out weapons and make adjustments to them, and every weapon he has scavenged in the game's world will be available to him here. There are workbenches throughout the world that Artyom can use to craft ammo and clean his weapons to stop them from jamming in combat, but he can only change his loadout back on the Aurora. Crafting plays a huge part in Exodus, and especially on higher difficulties, materials and ammo are in short supply, forcing the player to decide whether to craft a medkit or whether to spend the extra chemicals on cleaning their assault rifle so that it's more reliable in the next fight. Artyom can carry 3 weapons with him at all times, but one of them, the Tikhar pneumatic rifle, cannot be dropped or exchanged until very late in the game. This is by design, as the metal ball bearings that the Tikhar uses for ammunition can be crafted in the field and do not require a workbench. Additionally, the Quartermaster on the Aurora will present Artyom with an upgrade for the Tikhar after each mission, so it does become more and more powerful as the game progresses. I do wish that the game would let the player decide to take another weapon instead, as the remaining 2 weapon slots feel slightly restrictive in a game with such diverse weapon customization. Enemy design is similar to previous games, featuring an array of mutated beasts, including some zombie-like humanimals. There are plenty of human enemies to engage with throughout the game, and throughout the more open levels, players will find camps and settlements that can be taken down guns blazing or with a more stealthy approach. The way you approach encounters is influenced by the time of day, which will be displayed on Artyom's watch. Artyom can sleep on beds throughout the levels, which allow the player to switch between day and night rapidly. Exploring at night will make stealth encounters far easier, but more monsters will come out to hunt, so you will need to weigh up your objective and choose the right approach. Like previous Metro games, the controls don't feel particularly tight, and the shooting experience is definitely not as twitchy as Call of Duty, nor as refined as Battlefield. Artyom's movements are sluggish and deliberate, and weapons feel heavy and cumbersome. Whether this restrictive feeling is by design, I cannot say, but it would certainly fit perfectly with the theme of the game and its setting. As far as button layout is concerned, Exodus falls foul of having too many different inputs on PC. As well as the standard movement keys for strafing, sprinting and changing stance, there are several other keys assigned to tasks such as getting out Artyom's lighter, watch, backpack and map, all of which are awkwardly placed on the keyboard. Still, I find it hard to fully condemn this key mapping, as it is not only necessary on a keyboard, but also adds to the feeling of panic and desperation as you struggle to find the right key to open your backpack with a mutant just around the corner. As you will have no doubt noticed by now, Exodus is perhaps the best looking game ever to have been released, in part thanks to its implementation of Nvidia's RTX ray tracing technology. This provides an incredible global illumination solution on PC, as seen in all of the footage captured for this review. While the PC raises the bar for what is achievable in real-time rendering today, the console versions still hold up extremely well, and even with traditional approximated lighting methods, the game is head and shoulders above its older siblings visually. Model detail and textures are industry-leading, while top-tier animation and effects work solidifies 4A's engine as one of the best game creation tools in the business. Exodus's visual palette is impressive, and the artists have really taken full advantage of the game's more open setting. Colours are vibrant in places, and I'm reminded of how Gears of War 4 added colour to a series typically comprised of brown and grey. These open outdoor areas may be the new kid on the block for the series, but the murky, mysterious magic of the metro tunnels is still very much a part of the game. This time, the dark depths of the game world are more unsettling than ever, with the enhanced visuals capturing every corpse-ridden pit and every cobwebbed corridor in gruesome detail. My only complaint regarding the graphics on PC is that there is a distinct lack of granularity when adjusting the settings. Several Nvidia-specific features have their own toggle, like ray tracing, DLSS, PhysX and Hairworks, but for more basic settings, I was forced to select one of several presets, from low to extreme. These presets control every other aspect of the game, such as effects, shadows, model quality, and textures. This didn't cause me any issues personally, but for those with lower-end hardware, it would be nice to be able to reduce demanding settings like shadow quality individually. Exodus has a very hands-off approach to UI, and mostly gives information to the player using sound and visual cues. There is no health bar, and players will have to decide whether to use a medkit if they think Artyom is sufficiently wounded. There is a light level indicator on Artyom's watch that informs him of whether he can be seen by enemies, and a compass on his wrist and clipboard that points towards his objective. All of these would normally be UI elements, but 4A has cleverly integrated them into the game world itself, much like Isaac Clarke's integrated health bar in Dead Space. The rest of the UI only appears when changing weapons or pressing the reload key, and briefly shows the player the remaining ammo for their current weapon, as well as the number of medkits and gas mask filters they have remaining. As is traditional, this portion of the UI will not appear on Ranger difficulties, and players will have to keep track of this information themselves. Customizing weapons in the field or at a workbench reveals a comprehensive crafting menu with material stockpiles and costs clearly indicated. The parts tree for each weapon is also clear, showing all attachments at Artyom's disposal. One slightly irritating issue with the weapon attachments is that after selecting a part to swap out, the player is required to press the action key, E on PC, to attach it. Instead, it would be better if players could simply select the part they want to attach and have it automatically added to the weapon. The current system means that I often forgot I hadn't actually attached a weapon part and had to go back through the menu to effectively reattach it. Another issue is that I seemed to lose weapon attachments as I went through the game, and was unable to attach red dot sights to all of my weapons, even though I knew I had enough to go around. This was never explained, and perhaps there is some limit to the number of attachments that can be carried at once, but the game never told me this. My 6x sniper scope went missing altogether, even though it had only ever been attached to my sniper rifle, which I found puzzling. The sound design in Exodus is, for the most part, excellent, and the environmental sounds play a huge part in immersing the player in the Russian wasteland. Guns sound as one would expect, and give them the sense of heft that is reinforced by the slightly cumbersome controls. The sound is also used to great effect when Artyom is moving around in quieter moments of the game, and every deliberate movement that he makes in cutscenes has a sound associated with it, helping the player to experience the world through his ears as well as his eyes. The rustle of his clothing when moving, the heavy, strained breathing when wearing his gas mask, and the crunch of snow underfoot all help to place Artyom in the world. The only sounds that caused a problem for me were the sound of enemy footsteps. It is common for games, especially in the stealth genre, to deliberately magnify enemy footsteps, but this seems to be taken to an extreme in Exodus. Enemies seem to make a heavy thud or metallic clang no matter which surface they are walking on, and this can be heard by the player from quite a distance, even through walls and floors. The issue here is sound propagation, and this led me to think that an enemy was right next to me when he was in fact above me and in another room. Voice work is done well, with the main characters primarily voiced by Western actors whose emotional inflection is more accurately anglicised, making up for their false Russian accents. That said, many of the cast are native Russian speakers, and this is communicated through their characters' voices. There are also some familiar voices returning from previous games, albeit voicing different characters this time around. I can't speak for the quality of the Russian voice work, as I don't speak Russian, but the game is fully playable with a Russian voice track as well as an English one. This is a great feature, and to get the ultimate Metro experience, you can play the game in Russian with subtitles, or simply become fluent in Russian if you are not already. This level of dedication to providing English and authentic Russian voices does come at a cost, however. The movements, animations, and conversation timings for some characters in some scenes do not always sync up as they should, resulting in characters talking over one another briefly, or pausing unnaturally before responding to a prompt from another character. This is easily overlooked and did not ruin my experience nor shatter my immersion, but is worth knowing all the same. Another issue I had with the vocals was the directional placement of conversation. Sometimes I would have two characters dressed in armour and gas masks talking right in front of me, and it was difficult to determine which of the characters was actually speaking without focusing intently on their movements. The left and right channels weren't properly separated, and this led to some minor confusion. Again, this isn't a deal breaker when it comes to audio. The musical score by Alexei Omolchuk is very minimalist and features a lot of gentle guitar themes throughout the game, as well as some heavier tracks used in the main menu and during action set pieces. Music is used sparingly to convey specific feelings, especially when Artyom and Anna are in a scene together. Aside from carefully scripted moments, music is rarely used during gameplay. The score may be subtle, but it has enough of an impact to be worth including in this review. In many ways, it is the lack of music that contributes to the atmosphere of the game. The 4A engine may produce some of the most impressive visuals of this generation, but that visual polish comes at a steep cost. Without ray tracing, the game is playable well above 60 FPS at 1440p on a 2080 Ti, and even with RTX features enabled, the game can still hit 60 in most areas. However, those without bleeding-edge hardware will have to tweak the visual settings as much as the limited presets will allow to maintain consistent performance. The game's per-object motion blur helps enormously with improving fluidity when moving and shooting at lower frame rates, but some players may find motion blur uncomfortable or simply don't like the effect. Despite the heavy impact on graphics hardware, the game runs surprisingly well given how incredible its visuals are. This is largely thanks to the fact that 4A's engine is purpose-built and has not been cannibalized and forced to make a game that it was not built for. The final product may be a little rough around the edges, but it is based on a very solid technical foundation. Despite being such an ambitious game for a studio that has had to face so much hardship over the years, Exodus shipped with almost no bugs whatsoever. I only experienced minor animation glitches and a bizarre bug that tinted the outdoor lighting a peculiar shade of green. This issue was fixed upon reloading a checkpoint. I also experienced a single crash to desktop, although this could be attributed to an imperfect overclock on my graphics card. 4A games are to be commended for such thorough and effective playtesting and debugging before release, a rare practice in the AAA gaming scene these days. Metro Exodus takes steps to modernise a beloved series and does so spectacularly in many areas, while retaining the core values of a Metro game. I was concerned that the move to more open levels would detract from the experience, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that the levels were not watered down, nor did they lose any depth and detail that makes Metro such a joy to experience. You will like this game if you enjoyed the previous Metro games, as it feels refreshing yet very familiar if you have played 2033 or Last Light. Fans of other survival horror games like Resident Evil, The Last of Us, and Dead Space will also likely enjoy this series. Metro Exodus is available to buy on PC through the Epic Games Store, and on the PS4 and Xbox One. Its launch price is £50 or $60, but this will drop depending on how long it has been since launch. To address the irradiated elephant in the room, the game is indeed exclusive to the Epic Games Store on PC for 1 year, before becoming available to buy on Steam in 2020. I believe this was an obnoxiously aggressive move by Epic and Deep Silver, and while I do not approve of this business practice, the Epic Game Launcher is functional and allowed me to play and enjoy the game. If you feel that you have some sort of allegiance to Valve, my advice is to swallow your pride, download the Epic Launcher and play the game that 4A has worked so hard to produce. I gave Metro Exodus a score of 80% overall, and my scoring model is on the screen now so you can see the breakdown of the score for each section. Every section has a different weighting depending on their importance. I hope you enjoyed this review, and remember to leave a like and subscribe to my channel to see more. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.